Rome was the greatest empire the world had ever seen, an empire of gods, gladiators, and emperors worshipped as divine. Yet, from the shadows, a small group of poor fishermen and slaves followed a crucified man called Jesus. They were hunted, tortured, and killed in arenas. But their faith refused to die, and then, against all odds, Rome itself bowed before the cross. If you want to hear how the empire that tried to destroy Christianity became the empire that carried it to the world, stay tuned, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. In the 1st century, Rome was at the height of its glory. Its empire stretched across continents, its armies unmatched, its emperors seen as gods in human form. The streets of Rome were filled with marble temples, incense smoke, and statues of Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and dozens of other deities. Sacrifice and ritual were part of everyday life, binding the people to the state. To be Roman was to honor the gods and the emperor. Refusing to do so wasn't just strange, it was dangerous. Yet in the eastern corner of this vast empire, a small group was quietly spreading a message that went against everything Rome stood for. They were followers of a man called Jesus of Nazareth, a Jewish teacher who had been executed by Roman authority in Judea. Crucifixion was Rome's way of humiliating criminals, rebels, and slaves. To the empire, Jesus was nothing more than another troublemaker silenced on a wooden cross. But his followers believed the story didn't end with his death. They proclaimed he had risen from the dead, proving he was the Son of God. At first, this seemed laughable to Roman society. Who would follow a crucified man? But the teachings were radical and they spread fast. Love your enemies. Forgive those who wrong you. There is one God, greater than all the idols of Rome. Every soul is equal before him, slave or free, man or woman, rich or poor. For people trapped in a society of hierarchy and cruelty, this was a message of hope. The new faith spread underground, whispered in markets, prayed in private homes, and carried by travelers across provinces. But one thing set Christians apart from everyone else. They refused to worship the emperor or make sacrifices to Rome's gods. To Roman officials, this was not just odd, it was treason. Religion and politics were deeply tied together. To reject the gods meant rejecting Rome itself. And so, suspicion turned into hatred. By the time Emperor Nero ruled in the 60s AD, the Christians had become an easy scapegoat. When a great fire devastated Rome in 64 AD, Nero accused them of causing it. He ordered brutal punishments. Believers were torn apart by wild animals in arenas, crucified along the roads, or set on fire to light his gardens at night. Rome watched in shock. These people died singing hymns, forgiving their killers, showing no fear. Something about their courage unsettled the empire. Instead of dying out, the faith grew stronger. Over the next 2 centuries, Christianity survived wave after wave of persecution. Emperors changed, but the suspicion remained. Christians were accused of atheism because they rejected the gods of Rome. They were accused of disloyalty because they refused emperor worship. Wild rumors even claimed they practiced cannibalism, a distortion of the sacred communion where bread and wine symbolized the body and blood of Christ. Each time Rome struck, the movement only spread further. In the 2nd century, under Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Christians were executed in Lyon, France, where entire communities were wiped out. In North Africa, a young woman named Perpetua, only 22 years old, was thrown into the arena with wild beasts because she refused to renounce her faith. Her diary, preserved by believers, inspired generations with her bravery. During the reign of Decius in the mid-3rd century, a brutal empire-wide persecution swept the land. Every citizen was forced to perform a sacrifice to the Roman gods, receive a certificate proving their loyalty, or face punishment. Many Christians were imprisoned, tortured, or killed. Some gave in to fear and sacrificed, but others stood firm, creating deep debates within the faith about forgiveness and courage. The harshest blow came under Diocletian at the turn of the 4th century. Determined to restore traditional Roman religion, he launched what became known as the Great Persecution. Churches were burned, scriptures destroyed, bishops arrested. For nearly a decade, Christianity seemed under siege everywhere. Yet even then, the faith would not vanish. It was carried by slaves, soldiers, and merchants into every corner of the empire. By the late 3rd century, something astonishing had happened. Christianity was no longer a fringe cult. Despite persecution, it had taken root in every social class. There were Christian scholars and philosophers, Christian generals in the army, even members of noble families who had converted. What had begun with fishermen and slaves was now spreading into the halls of Roman power. Rome could not crush it. In fact, the more it tried, the more the faith seemed to grow. Something was changing in the empire, setting the stage for a dramatic turn no one could have predicted. The year was 312 AD and Rome was in chaos. Civil wars had torn the empire apart as generals fought for the throne. One of these generals was Constantine, the son of a Roman officer. He was a skilled commander, ambitious and ruthless, but also searching for something greater to guide him. His moment of destiny came before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, just outside Rome, where he faced his rival Maxentius. Whoever won would control the empire. The night before the battle, Constantine claimed to have seen a vision in the sky. Accounts differ, but one described a shining cross of light with the words, "In this sign, you will conquer." Another version said he dreamed of Christ telling him to fight under this symbol. Whatever he saw, it changed him. He ordered his soldiers to paint the Christian symbol, the Chi-Rho, the first letters of Christ's name, on their shields. When battle came, Constantine's army, though outnumbered, won a stunning victory. Maxentius drowned in the Tiber River while trying to retreat. Constantine entered Rome as master of the empire, convinced that the Christian God had given him the crown. For the first time in history, the most powerful man in the Roman world looked to Christianity not as an enemy, but as a protector. A year later, in 313, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan with his co-emperor Licinius. It was a revolutionary law. Christianity was legalized. No longer would believers be hunted for their faith. They could worship openly, build churches, and reclaim property seized during persecution. After centuries of hiding in catacombs and praying in secret, Christians walked into the sunlight. But Constantine went further. He supported Christian leaders, gave money to build basilicas, and called bishops together to settle disputes. The most famous was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where bishops from across the empire gathered to define what Christians believed about Jesus. Was he fully divine, fully human, or both? The result was the Nicene Creed, a declaration of faith still recited in churches today. Constantine himself was not baptized until near his death, and he still honored some pagan traditions. Yet under him, Christianity moved from the margins to the very heart of imperial power. What began as an outlawed sect was now embraced by the emperor himself. The world of Rome would never be the same. After Constantine, Christianity's rise accelerated. Emperors who followed him were divided. Some supported the old gods, others supported the new faith. But the balance was tipping. Churches grew in every city. Christian bishops gained influence not just in religion, but in politics. The old temples to Jupiter, Apollo, and Venus still stood, but their power was fading. The people of Rome were changing. By the middle of the 4th century, Christianity was no longer just tolerated. It was becoming the dominant religion. In 380 AD, Emperor Theodosius took the final step. He issued the Edict of Thessalonica, declaring Christianity the official state religion of the Roman Empire. From that moment, the worship of Rome's traditional gods was banned. Sacrifices to Jupiter or Mars were outlawed. Temples were closed, their treasures seized, their rituals condemned. For centuries, Christians had been hunted as traitors. Now it was pagans who found themselves pushed aside. Many resisted. Some temples were destroyed by angry mobs. Pagan philosophers argued against the new order. But the tide could not be stopped. The cross replaced the eagle as Rome's most powerful symbol. The empire of gladiators, sacrifices, and emperor worship was becoming an empire of bishops, churches, and Christian law. The transformation was not without struggle. Arguments erupted inside the church itself about doctrine, power, and authority. New heresies appeared, forcing councils to meet again and again. But no matter the disputes, One fact was clear. Christianity was the faith of Rome now. The empire that had once crucified Jesus' followers was now carrying his name to every corner of its vast territory. By the 5th century, Christianity had reshaped Rome. Basilicas rose where temples once stood. Sunday became a day of rest across the empire. Roman law was influenced by Christian values. Bishops advised emperors, sometimes even standing against them. The faith that began with fishermen and slaves now guided kings and generals. Yet the story was not only about politics. For ordinary people, Christianity gave meaning in a harsh world. It offered forgiveness instead of vengeance, charity instead of cruelty, eternal life instead of despair. It built hospitals for the sick, shelters for the poor, and communities for those forgotten by society. When the Western Roman Empire finally fell in 476 AD, Christianity did not collapse with it. Instead, it endured, carried on by the Church, spreading even beyond the old empire's borders. Missionaries took the faith to distant lands. The legacy of Rome lived on, not in marble statues of Jupiter or triumphal arches of emperors, but in the cross of Christ. So how did the Roman Empire become Christian? Through centuries of struggle, courage, vision, and transformation. From the arenas of persecution to Constantine's vision in the sky, from Theodosius' decrees to the fall of Rome, the story is one of the most dramatic shifts in history. The empire that once tried to crush Christianity became the very empire that carried it to the world. And so, the Roman Empire's greatest transformation was not in its armies or its conquests, but in its soul. From crucifying Christians in the arenas to carrying the cross on its banners, Rome changed the course of history forever. The empire that once tried to silence a crucified man ended up spreading his name to every corner of the known world. Temples crumbled, emperors passed, but the faith endured, stronger than the empire itself. This is how Rome became Christian, and how a movement born in the shadows outlived the empire of marble and iron. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because more stories of the past, full of power, drama, and transformation, are coming your way.